Namaskar and welcome to World Today. The main story across the world today is COP26, that summit on the environment, where world leaders are making several commitments that we hope will save the planet, like also the promise to end deforestation by 2030. That's one of the promises. Here are our headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi makes a big announcement. Small island developing states, ISRO, SIDS, will also provide data related to cyclones, coastline monitoring in advance so that they can prepare themselves. The Prime Minister calls on the developed countries to keep their promises on climate financing. He says that when climate goals are being redone, then financing goals cannot remain the same. At least 15 are killed, and with 2 explosions that are followed by gunfire in Afghanistan's biggest military hospital in Kabul. The explosions took place at the entrance of the 400-bed Sardar Mohammad Daud Khan Hospital in central Kabul. Diwali begins in India with Dhanteras celebrations kicking off the 5-day festival of lights. So let's begin with the big news. In India, along with Australia, the UK and small island developing states, they launched a new initiative for infrastructure for resilient island states. It's called IRIS. It happened on the sidelines of COP26. Australia, India and the UK have committed an initial funding of $10 million. Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched the new program to secure and strengthen critical infrastructure in small island states against disasters induced by climate change. Infrastructure for Resilient Island States, or IRIS, is the first major initiative by the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, or CDRI, which was started by India in 2019. And speaking at the launch, the Prime Minister said that the event fills all with new hope and belief, and it gives us the satisfaction to do something for the most vulnerable nations. He also declared that ISRO will build a special data window for SIDS, that is small island developing states, and with this the SIDS will continue to get timely information about cyclones, about coral reef monitoring, about coastline monitoring and the like, and that will happen through satellites.
Excellencies, infrastructure for resilient island states (IRIS) का लॉन्च एक नई आशा जगाता है, नया विश्वास देता है। ये सबसे वनरेबल देशों के लिए कुछ करने का संतोष देता है। मैं इसके लिए कोलिशन फॉर डिजास्टर रेजिलिएंट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर (CDRI) को बधाई देता हूं। इस महत्वपूर्ण मंच पर मैं ऑस्ट्रेलिया और यूके समेत सभी सहयोगी देशों और विशेषकर मॉरिशस और जमैका समेत छोटे द्वीप समूहों के लीडर्स का स्वागत करता हूं, उन्हें हार्दिक धन्यवाद देता हूं। मैं UN सेक्रेटरी जनरल का भी आभार व्यक्त करता हूं कि उन्होंने इस लॉन्च के लिए अपना बहुमूल्य समय दिया। एक्सेलेंसीज, पिछले कुछ दशकों ने सिद्ध किया है कि क्लाइमेट चेंज के प्रकोप से कोई भी अछूता नहीं है, चाहे वो विकसित देश हो या फिर प्राकृतिक संसाधनों से धनी देश हो, सभी के लिए ये बहुत बड़ा खतरा है। लेकिन इसमें भी क्लाइमेट चेंज से सबसे अधिक खतरा स्मॉल आइलैंड डेवलपिंग स्टेट्स (SIDS) को है। ये उनके लिए जीवन मृत्यु की बात है, ये उनके अस्तित्व के लिए चुनौती है। क्लाइमेट चेंज की वजह से आई आपदाएं उनके लिए सचमुच प्रलय का रूप ले सकती हैं। ऐसे देशों के क्लाइमेट चेंज न सिर्फ उनके जीवन की सुरक्षा के लिए बल्कि उनकी अर्थव्यवस्था के लिए भी बड़ी चुनौती है। ऐसे देश टूरिज्म पर बहुत निर्भर हैं, लेकिन प्राकृतिक आपदाओं के चलते टूरिस्ट भी उनके पास आने से घबराते हैं। फ्रेंड्स, वैसे तो सीड्स देश सदियों से नेचर के साथ समन्वय में जीते रहे हैं। वे प्रकृति के स्वाभाविक साइकिल के साथ एडेप्ट करना जानते हैं, लेकिन पिछले कई दशकों में हुई स्वार्थपूर्ण व्यवहार की वजह से प्रकृति का जो अस्वाभाविक रूप सामने आया है, उसका परिणाम आज निर्दोष स्मॉल आइलैंड स्टेट्स झेल रहे हैं। और इसलिए मेरे लिए CDRI या आयरिस सिर्फ एक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की बात नहीं है, बल्कि ये मानव कल्याण के अत्यंत संवेदनशील दायित्व का हिस्सा है। ये मानव जाति के प्रति हम सभी की कलेक्टिव जिम्मेदारी है। ये एक तरह से हमारे पापों का साझा प्रायश्चित भी है। फ्रेंड्स, CDRI किसी सेमिनार से निकली कल्पना नहीं है, बल्कि CDRI का जन्म वर्षों के मंथन और अनुभव का परिणाम है। छोटे द्वीप देशों पर मंडरा रहे क्लाइमेट चेंज के खतरे को भांपते हुए भारत ने पैसिफिक आइलैंड और कैरिकॉम देशों के साथ सहयोग के लिए विशेष व्यवस्थाएं बनाई। हमने उनके नागरिकों को सोलर तकनीकों में ट्रेन किया, वहां इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के विकास के लिए निरंतर योगदान दिया। इस कड़ी में आज इस प्लेटफॉर्म पर मैं भारत की ओर से एक और नई पहल की घोषणा कर रहा हूं। भारत की स्पेस एजेंसी ISRO सीड्स के लिए एक स्पेशल डेटा विंडो को निर्माण करेगी। इससे सीड्स को सैटेलाइट के माध्यम से साइक्लोन, कोरल रीफ मॉनिटरिंग, कोस्टलाइन मॉनिटरिंग आदि के बारे में टाइमली जानकारी मिलती रहेगी। फ्रेंड्स, आयरिस के साकार करने में CDRI और सीड्स दोनों ने मिलकर काम किया है। यह को-क्रिएशन और को-बेनिफिट्स का अच्छा उदाहरण है। इसलिए मैं आज आयरिस के लॉन्च को बहुत अहम मानता हूं। आयरिस के माध्यम से सीड्स को टेक्नोलॉजी, फाइनेंस, जरूरी जानकारी तेजी से मोबिलाइज करने में आसानी होगी। स्मॉल आइलैंड स्टेट्स के क्वालिटी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को प्रोत्साहन मिलने से वहां जीवन और आजीविका दोनों को लाभ मिलेगा। मैंने पहले भी कहा है कि दुनिया इन देशों को कम जनसंख्या वाले स्मॉल आइलैंड के रूप में देखती है, लेकिन मैं इन देशों को बड़े सामर्थ्य वाले लार्ज ओशन स्टेट्स के रूप में देखता हूं। जैसे समुद्र से निकले मोतियों की माला सबकी शोभा बढ़ाती है, वैसे ही समुद्र से घिरे सीड्स विश्व की भी शोभा बढ़ाते हैं। मैं आपको विश्वास दिलाता हूं कि भारत इस नई पूरी योजना को पूरा सहयोग देगा और इसकी सफलता के लिए CDRI अन्य पार्टनर देशों और संयुक्त राष्ट्र के साथ मिलकर काम करेगा। CDRI और सभी छोटे द्वीप समूहों को इस नई पहल के लिए फिर से बधाई और शुभकामनाएं। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
So that was Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and in his opening address, the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson urged the countries to join the Infrastructure for Resilient Island States initiative and help in bending the CO2 curve.
I would encourage every country that has benefited from pumping CO2 into the air over the last, whatever it is, 250 years, to join this campaign and to help. And that's why we've made the $100 billion a year commitment, the $100 billion a year commitment, such a crucial part of the UK's presidency and pre-presidency. And I think that we've got to do it. We've got to help people to adapt, we've got to mitigate, but above all, we've got to change the numbers. We've got to bend the curve. We've got to stop this remorseless increase in CO2.
Well, the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison thanked India and the UK for their leadership of the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, or CDRI.
I also want to thank, of course, India and the United Kingdom for their leadership of the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. And I acknowledge in particular the Quad support, including the US and Japan's support, together with India, for the CDRI. I'm proud that Australia has already announced our $10 million commitment towards getting IRIS up and running, and I'm proud to be here to launch it today. All of us are here because we believe in fair and practical action to address climate change. We're here because we're family, particularly amongst our Pacific family, and all of us are here because we want to achieve those outcomes.
And in his address, the Prime Minister of Fiji warned that the world is warming and that it's warming up too fast and its impacts are terrifying. He said that it's high time to act now.
Whether it's storms, floods, or fires, the same hard lessons are being learned around the world. Building to last year's standards is building to lose. The world is warming, the impacts are terrifying, and the standards we build must be defined by and ready for those intensifying risks. It takes resources to build resilience, but we either pay to adapt now or pay a much higher price in the aftermath of climate-driven devastation.
Well, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Andrew Holness, also welcomed the launch of the Infrastructure for Resilient Island States initiative. Let's listen to what he said.
Jamaica believes in innovation as part of our national strategy and with development partners and the private sector. Jamaica will become the first country in the world to develop a predictive climate risk assessment planning tool for major infrastructure investments. Again, I thank the conveners for their leadership in building this critical and practical coalition to advance the development of climate-resilient infrastructure.
Well, the Prime Minister of Mauritius, Pravind Juggernauth, welcomed the launch of the Infrastructure for Resilient Island States initiative. He said that his country is proud to be associated with it.
Mauritius is proud to associate itself with the launch of IRIS, a SIDS-specific initiative that will undoubtedly help this group of countries to become more resilient, promote inclusive infrastructure, and ultimately achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. SIDS remain in the top list of the current World Risk Report 2021 of countries with high risk indices.
We are now joined by Dilip Sinha, senior diplomat, to throw light on the subject. Thank you very much, Ambassador Sinha, for being with us. So this initiative, IRIS, how would you, what would you say initially? What are your initial comments about it in terms of the importance and the fact that it will probably cover in the entire world, in a sense?
Thank you, Mark. The small island developing states, SIDS as they are called, are the most vulnerable countries to climate change. Global warming threatens their very existence, and they have been the most concerned about global warming. And in the past, they had even targeted India at times because India is among the major emitters, and perhaps because we were not able to provide as much assistance to them as certain other developed countries could. We were seen as one of the countries that were not serious enough or not committed enough to assisting them. And that needed to be addressed. And in this particular initiative, this IRIS initiative, India utilizes the capacity that it possesses, which is of remote sensing through its satellites, to help these island countries identify areas that are vulnerable, whether it is because of rising sea levels or the coral reefs. So this is one area where India can provide assistance to them and enable them to take action. And India, of course, also gives them development assistance. Yes. So as the Prime Minister said, this is a kind of meeting your penance for your sins, in the sense that you are paying back what these islands deserve by way of international assistance for being victims of crimes that they have not committed.
Indeed, we are also joined by our correspondent Arun Sharma, who is in Glasgow at this time. Arun, can you hear me? Yes, Arun. So the small island developing states, they cover the entire world, the globe, and they form groupings like CARICOM, then the Pacific Islands, the Indian Ocean islands. So, and they have little, the word little may not be too right at this point of time, but they form groupings. And the fact is that they are the most vulnerable due to the levels of sea rise that are taking place. The question that comes to mind is how have they been placing their case forward at COP26 with all the kind of commitments that the developed world is making? How much impact is it going to have on them?
Well, so we always say this fact that all for one and one for all. So that's what is happening at the COP26. Yes, there are various groupings being formed, but the ultimate goal and of course the focus is that how can we protect planet Earth? So that's the basic idea. Who commits what? That's a different thing. But yes, commitment is important. And we have seen that there are various groupings. We know this fact, and everybody is trying to protect the planet. Yes, we have seen that in last 1 decade or in last many years, the developed countries were shying away from fulfilling their commitments as far as climate goals are concerned. But now in post-COVID pandemic time, one thing is that that's very much sure, and every country has realized this point, that if in case you don't respect the environment will not respect any of the boundaries, be it the developed countries or developing countries. And that's the reason everybody knows that the impact of climate change can be very much harsh and ruthless. And in that context only, we know this fact. Now, developed countries are also coming forward and fulfilling and trying to fulfill primarily their climate commitments. Yes, today was a big day as far as the climate change is concerned. Why? Yeah. Because an initiative called IRIS has been launched jointly by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and of course his counterparts of UK and Australia. And the idea is that how can the island nations can be protected from the rising impact of climate change by creating infrastructure. Now, India has also announced a major announcement was made by Prime Minister Narendra Modi today that a special window will be created by ISRO. This ISRO will be sharing the data with respect to cyclones, with respect to the coastal monitoring. So all the monitoring will be done, and the special window will be provided by ISRO to the island countries so that they can preempt the any kind of disaster that's coming in, and they can prepare accordingly. And in that context, this is a kind of infrastructure that India is trying to build. And of course, 10 billion
speaking about
Australia and India. Sure. So yes, it's an important initiative taken by India as well to protect the island countries. And yes, one for all and all for one.
Indeed, Arun, but the question that I was actually addressing was that how does one actually enter into coalition with IRIS? Because it's an initiative, it's launched by 3 countries, and there are hundreds of countries that can benefit from it. And so, I mean, is there a procedure involved, or are they all automatically part of it, all the small island states?
Okay, so let me recall one thing, Mark, that in 2019, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in the United States of America for a UNGA meeting, at that point in time, Prime Minister Modi did meet all the island countries, the leadership of all the island countries in 2019. Now, these island countries did raise about the concerns to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and at that point in time in 2019, Prime Minister said that we'll be having some kind of coordinated efforts. So yes, all the like-minded countries are coming together that are focusing upon the fact that how can these island countries can be saved. Yes, as far as the feasibility is concerned, according to the feasibility, they form grouping. So as of now, yes, India, UK, along with Australia, these countries have come together, like-minded countries have come together to form a grouping and thinking about the fact that how can island countries can be saved. UK, since it's the leadership or the presidency as far as COP26 is concerned, it's hosting the COP26, and therefore UK was part of this, and of course Australia and of course India. these two nations, the big nations primarily have come together to protect or to save these island countries as far as massive infrastructure building is concerned. And yes, sir, there is I mean, the way in the International Solar Alliance, it started with a less number of people, but gradually it was expanded to other countries as well. In a similar fashion or similar manner, the groupings work, and the groupings is expanded, looking at their working style, the mechanism. The groupings are further expanded gradually going forward. Just like International Solar Alliance, just like other groupings, yes, this grouping will also work. It will be expanded going forward gradually. But the main motto is that how can you protect the interest of island nations as far as climate change is concerned.
Indeed. Thanks very much, Arun. I'm told that you have you're short of time, so thanks for joining us. Ambassador Sinha, let me turn to you once again. So the issue also is about distance. You know, these islands are not close to each other. They are small islands. There is the satellite technology that you talked about, which is extremely important. But let's take the Pacific Ocean, for instance, and the Pacific Island states. They are far away from each other, and they occupy about 15% of the world in terms of their distance, and they only have like what about 2-point-something million people. Is it is it going to be a difficult thing to coordinate this kind of a response?
Well, it will not be easy, certainly, especially the Pacific Islands. But we must remember that one of the largest islands, Fiji, is very close to India culturally, because of the large Indian diaspora there. And the presence of Australia is extremely important to this, because Australia is physically close to these islands, and many of them have direct flight links and shipping links with Australia. So Australia's physical presence in that region is extremely important for this. But our assistance has been, of course, calibrated to provide a satellite imaging and satellite photography, which enables these countries to get prior warning alerts for cyclones and for coral reefs. These are things that you don't really need to be physically present over there. These are done through satellites, which keep circumnavigating the world. So this is an area where India has a certain degree of expertise, in fact, fairly good expertise in this. And that is why India, I think, has offered this particular technology and facility to these islands. And the other countries of this alliance will offer the other facilities in which they have expertise.
Ambassador Sinha, the question that will come to mind is that these are, as we heard some of the prime ministers talking from the island states, that it's a matter of survival. It's now. I mean, act now, because otherwise we are not going to be on the face of the earth, in a sense. It's that kind of urgency. This initiative needs a lot more than just 3 countries on it, isn't it? And the fact is that also, I mean, we heard the UK Prime Minister talk about that the $100 billion, which was basically what the developed world is putting into mitigation for the entire world. But the point is, how much of that is going to be towards dedicated towards the small island states? They are a separate unit, and they are the ones who require top priority at this point in time, one would think.
Well, yes, climate change negotiations have been all about broken promises and a lot of tokenism, people playing to the gallery. Now, in the Paris Agreement, the deal was that countries would take nationally determined contributions, they would take commitments. In return, there would be assistance forthcoming to the tune of $100 billion every year. Now, this figure has never been reached. I think the highest was reached was $80 billion.
Yes.
Now, the Prime Minister has upped the ante here and said that it should actually go up to $1 trillion, because on the one side, the climate lobby and the climate activists have been demanding that the Paris commitments should be upgraded, and India has upgraded its commitments. Now, if the commitments are being upgraded, so must the assistance be upgraded, and that is why this $1 trillion should be a figure that should be the target now, because it's extremely important that the greenhouse gas emission mitigation be met now. We know that the global temperature has already risen by 1.2 degrees Celsius, according to IPCC reports, and the 1.5 degrees Celsius increase may actually be touched in this decade itself. So what is considered to be an aspirational goal of the Paris Agreement may be breached very soon. And this is going to impact the small island developing states, especially the coral islands, which don't rise very high above the sea level. If you remember, when the tsunami took place a decade ago, the wave went right across the island, some of the islands of the Maldives. So that is the kind of danger that these islands face, especially in the Pacific, and the increasing intensity of cyclones, the frequency of cyclones that we are seeing, impacts these islands very, very severely. So the world has to address them both by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which incidentally have actually gone up by 60% since this whole thing about UNFCCC and the climate change negotiations started 30 years ago. So they have to be more serious about mitigation, that is reducing emissions, and the other providing assistance for adaptation, especially to the small island developing states.
So the question is about adaptation of these small island states, because they survive on, their economy is largely on tourism, and the Prime Minister also spoke about that. The fact is that with all these adverse climate events that are taking place, the tourists are likely to run away, and the economies of these countries will also diminish as a result of that, or they have to find new other avenues. I mean, this is a much more serious problem than people are giving it, enough importance right now.
Oh yes, it's not just a question of the economy, it's about the existence of the country itself. If the country starts going underwater, then we will start having climate refugees from these islands, because the people will have to emigrate en masse.
Absolutely.
And we are already seeing large numbers of climate refugees because of desertification and large droughts in certain areas. But from these islands, their very existence will come to an end, and they will have to move to other countries. There will have to be international movement. Quite unlike, let us say, in some deltaic regions or some other coastal regions, if people are moving, they can move inland in their own country. But in these small island developing states, they will have to move to a different country altogether. And that will be a far greater impact for them and far greater trauma for them than just moving inside the country as climate refugees.
So we know on the greater debate then, Ambassador Dilip Sinha, that greenhouse gas emissions have to be reduced to pre-industrial levels if that's going to happen. And the point is that they are first talking about net zero, and then they have to talk about net negative. Now, I mean, we're not even conceptualizing net negative, but there is technology that will be in place, we hope, because technology is advancing. I mean, that's the whole nature of survival, that it would advance hopefully by 2050 to bring us into a stage where we can begin to think net negative to try and reverse the trend of climate change. Do you think that that is the way forward? I mean, is that the way the things are moving? Because somebody actually did talk about net negative on our program on DD India.
Well, net negative is the way forward because, as we all know, and there's some figures like in the pre-industrial age, the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the concentration, was about 280 particles per million, which was the concentration for several centuries before the industrial age.
Okay.
And now it has already gone up to 413 particles per million, and we can see the impact of this. Now, experts, nobody knows what impact further increase in the concentration of these greenhouse gases in the atmosphere will be, but many people feel that one tipping point can be when it reaches 450 particles per million, which can actually lead to changes in the direction of ocean currents and wind currents. But there is still the problem that this Glasgow summit cannot possibly produce very dramatic results because the largest emitter in the world by far, which is about 27% of the greenhouse gas emissions, comes from China.
China, yes.
And China is not even participating, and China's President Xi has not come down. Russia is slightly smaller, is the fourth largest emitter, has not come down either to participate in this conference. And the United States still doesn't have a domestic mandate because Biden's plan is still stuck with the Senate. Yeah. So you have these large emitters that do not have either perhaps the desire or the capacity to make serious commitments in this Glasgow conference. So we really have to hope, wait and hope that things will improve. Right. Meanwhile, India has taken the lead in upgrading its commitments, and also in raising the demand and pointing out that climate finance and low-cost technologies are essential for enabling developing countries to meet their adaptation needs.
Right.
So it's a difficult game. Sure. It's a very serious challenge that the world faces. India has to do things for its own good because of our own warming as well as pollution levels, right, and also because of the international obligations that we have.
Now, in case climate finance is not taking place, I mean, and climate justice as a result doesn't take place, then the question that comes to mind is that people have to use the resources that they have with them, and coal is one of those resources. Fossil fuels are resources. They will have to be, I mean, they are resources that are converted to help the economy grow. And the choice, even, you know, if these are at some stage put into the category of resources that cannot be used, I mean, if there ever is a mandate that they cannot be used, even then they will always be tempted to be used, because they are pushing the economy as we understand it. Can there possibly be any institution that can stop the use of fossil fuels over time?
Well, international pressure and international awareness is all that can be done in this. For example, when we see our cities getting polluted, and let's say the pollution levels in Delhi being at dangerously high levels, public opinion has to wake up. Now, for example, in Delhi we have stopped the Indraprasth coal-fired plant because it used to pollute a lot. Now, if Delhi wants to have clean air, so must the other parts of India. So wherever there are coal-fired plants, they have to start using the technologies for carbon capture and storage, because without that, without what's called the unabated coal plants, you are destroying the lives of the people that live around you. So one has to worry about oneself in the same degree as one worries about the global climate. Of course, in climate change, the whole world is in it together. One country alone cannot control global warming, but each country has to do its bit, and international pressure, greater public opinion, public awareness is needed to pursue this global campaign.
Ambassador Dilip Sinha, thank you very much for enlightening us on a wide range of subjects concerned with the COP26 and, of course, the IRIS program initiative. Now, moving on then to our next story. As China also sees spiraling cases of COVID-19, the country has stepped up the entry and exit in the capital Beijing in a bid to contain the spread of the disease. Beijing has asked its residents who are on domestic trips outside Beijing to put off their return plans if they have visited locations that have reported confirmed cases during the same period. The restrictions have come as cases continue to climb nationally, and also raising concerns about the efficacy of the zero-COVID policy. Well, Beijing is also gearing up to host the Winter Olympics in February next year, for which hundreds of international athletes are expected to participate, and the recent flare-up of cases may be a big challenge for it. Earlier on Monday, the country announced closing of Shanghai Disneyland for 2 days in the wake of a single positive case being reported in a visitor there. So China has more than 97,000 cases with 4,600 fatalities. Well, COVID-19 has ravaged across Russia, with the number of cases and the death toll breaching its own 24-hour records. The country has already imposed restrictions to stem the surge in the number of cases. Several hospitals in the country's capital, Moscow, are flooded, and they are over-flooded, in fact, with patients facing a crunch of oxygen supply. So Russia, what has it done? It was the first to approve a COVID-19 vaccine, but it's struggling to inoculate its own population. The country's COVID-19 cases have crossed 55,54,000. The fatalities stand above 2,39,000. Israel has eased restrictions on international travel, allowing vaccinated foreign tourists to visit the country for the first time after 18 months. The country has permitted only vaccinated tourists who have received their COVID-19 vaccine jabs in the last 6 months, with some exceptions such as humanitarian or medical needs. The coronavirus pandemic has adversely impacted the tourism industry in Israel. It's faced a drop, in fact, of 80% in 2020 after hitting a record high of 4.55 million in 2019. And that contributed to $7.2 billion to Israel's economy. And it also boosted the tourism-dependent Bethlehem. Now, COVID-19 cases in Israel, they stand at 13,28,000 with more than 8,100 fatalities. As Thailand has removed a mandatory quarantine for tourists, crowds of passengers went through disease control and document checks at the airport there. Now, under the new travel rules, the country has allowed a quarantine-free travel to vaccinated foreign passengers. The travelers will be required to spend their first night in a pre-approved hotel, and then they receive a negative COVID-19 test before they are able to travel freely in the country. The Southeast Asian country, it's approved visitors from more than 60 countries, which include China and the US. Thailand currently has, they have about 19,27,000 cases of COVID-19. The death toll is crossing about 19,000. It's crossed 19,000, 19,300, in fact, to be more exact. Well, some sports news now. India lost the second group match, of course, to New Zealand by 8 wickets, but it's not over as yet for the men in blue, according to some. Take a look at our next report to know if India can make it to the semi-finals and how they can. This is a possible route.
India lost its second group match to New Zealand by 8 wickets in the T20 Cricket World Cup after losing its opening match to Pakistan by 10 wickets. Chasing a 111-run target, New Zealand continued their unbeaten T20 World Cup spree against India by sealing the chase in the 15th over. It was a 72-run partnership for the second wicket between Darrell and Kane Williamson, which didn't let the Indian bowlers stand tall on their potential for the second time in a row, and especially as the top order struggled throughout in both the matches. Though the team at this point of time needs to rework, analyze and once again line up their playing 11 with decoding their strengths and weaknesses, it's not all over yet for Team India at the T20 Cricket World Cup. Even after losing its do-or-die match against Team New Zealand, with continuing their struggling performance on the pitches, Team India can still make it to the semi-finals of the Cricket World Cup. Let's take a look at India's road to T20 Cricket World Cup semi-finals. Factor 1. Either Scotland or Namibia needs to beat New Zealand in upcoming group stage matches. Factor 2. India needs to win all remaining group stage matches, that is against Afghanistan, Scotland and Namibia. Factor 3. India needs to maintain a better NRR, which is net run rate, in comparison to New Zealand. Factor 4. Afghanistan needs to beat New Zealand to ensure all teams are tied on 6 points, so best NRR moves ahead. While India's fate will be decided by a 4-factor approach, the need of the hour is immediate analysis and course correction for the men in blue to strategize a winning game plan for their upcoming matches at the ongoing T20 Cricket World Cup. Sports Desk, DD India.
Well, Jos Buttler set the T20 World Cup alight with his maiden T20 international century, helping England to register their fourth successive win in the tournament, and the Englishman produced a batting masterclass in Sharjah, smashing an unbeaten 101 of just 67 balls. This is against Sri Lanka, and prompting England's star all-rounder Ben Stokes to call him the best in the world. Well, Buttler has also become the first English batsman to score a century in all 3 formats of the game. Here's a detailed report.
England has become the first team to reach the semi-finals in the ongoing ICC T20 World Cup. England made it to the semi-finals from Group 1 with 4 consecutive victories in the tournament. English opener Jos Buttler played an important role in the victory against Sri Lanka while playing an unbeaten century. Buttler played an unbeaten innings of 101 runs against Sri Lanka. During this innings, he also made many records in his name. Buttler, who opened the innings for England, remained in the crease till the end and scored a brilliant century. He hit 6 sixes and 6 fours in his innings. Buttler completed his century by hitting a 6 off the last ball of the innings. This is Buttler's highest score in T20 cricket and also his first century. Earlier this year, he played an unbeaten innings of 83 runs against India. With this, he has become the first England batsman to score a century for his country in all 3 formats. He has 9 centuries in 2 ODIs and Tests and 1 century in T20s. Jos Buttler played the second highest innings as a wicketkeeper in the T20 World Cup. The record for playing the biggest innings in the T20 World Cup in the name of Ren McCullum, who scored 123 runs. He completed 1,000 runs in international cricket as an opener during his unbeaten century against Sri Lanka. He became the fastest batsman to complete 1,000 runs as an opener in T20 international cricket for England. He broke Alex Hale's record by touching this figure in 26 innings. At the same time, he also achieved the feat of scoring the fastest 2,000 runs in international cricket for England. Buttler broke the record of Ian Morgan, who did this feat in 83 innings. Apart from Buttler, English captain Ian Morgan also made special records against Sri Lanka. Morgan has become the captain with the most number of matches in T20 internationals. This is Morgan's 43rd win in T20 international cricket as captain. Morgan has captained the England team in 68 T20 internationals so far. And prior to Morgan, the record for most matches won as captain in T20 international cricket was held by former Afghanistan captain Asghar Afghan, who won 42 out of 52 matches as captain. Afghan has said goodbye to international cricket on Sunday itself. In this match against England, Sri Lankan spinner Vanendu Hasaranga achieved a big achievement while bowling brilliantly. With 2 wickets, Hasaranga holds the record for most wickets in a calendar year. He also took a hat-trick in ODI debut and in the World Cup T20 as well. Earlier, the record of taking most wickets in a calendar year was held by South Africa's Tabriz Shamsi. Sports Desk, DD India.
The world number 1 and 9-time Australian Open champion Novak Djokovic has said that he was unsure if he would defend his title at next year's Australian Open. The state of Victoria, where the Grand Slam event takes place in Melbourne, has introduced a vaccine mandate for professional athletes, although authorities have not yet clarified what the requirement will be for those coming from abroad. Djokovic, who is tied with Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal on a record 20 Grand Slam titles, added that he will not be commenting on the matter again until official requirements are announced.
I'm going to decide on whether I go to Australia or not after I see the official statement from the Tennis Australia. Right now we don't have any official announcement or statement, so until that's out I won't be talking about this anymore because you know, I don't want to be part of the stories about the assumptions and what ifs. When the official condition requirements to travel to Australia and play in Australia are out, then obviously I'll see what I personally do with that, and also the bigger group of the players, you know, because the situation is obviously different in Australia than most part of the world.
So let's now take a look at what's making news, the headlines across the globe in News at a Glance.
Authorities of the Drug Control Police in Costa Rica seized 2,575 packages of cocaine in a container on a pier in the coastal city of Limon. According to official statement, each one of the 2,575 packages contained 1 kilogram of apparent cocaine, and they were all traveling inside black backpacks. Authorities believe the shipment's destination to be Europe. The drugs passed through Colombia before reaching the port of Moín in Costa Rica. Costa Rica holds joint operations
cooperations with the United States, Colombia and Panama to prevent drug trafficking. People who earn a living from fishing in the English Channel battened down the hatches on Monday for an escalation of a Franco-British row over fishing licenses that they anticipate will be costly on all sides. France alleges Britain is not honouring a post-Brexit deal on access to British fishing grounds and has said that from midnight on Monday, 1st of November, it will retaliate by stepping up checks on trucks coming from Britain and barring British trawlers from docking in French ports. A luxury residential high-rise under construction in Nigeria's commercial capital Lagos collapsed on 1st of November. Possibly 100 people were at work when the building came crashing down at the site of an affluent neighborhood of Ikoyi. Excavators dug through the rubble and twisted metal wires. It was not immediately clear what caused the collapse. World Today Desk, DD India.
At least 15 people were killed and 34 wounded when two explosions followed by gunfire hit Afghanistan's biggest military hospital in Kabul. According to the Taliban security officials, happened today, the 2nd of November, and the explosions took place at the entrance of the 400-bed Sardar Mohammad Daud Khan Hospital in central Kabul. Security forces had been sent to the area, the Interior Ministry spokesperson Qari Saeed Khosti said. Now, there was no confirmation of casualty numbers, but a Taliban security official speaking on condition of anonymity said that at least 15 dead and 34 wounded. So there was no immediate claim also of responsibility for these blasts. The blasts add to a growing list of attacks and killings since the Taliban completed their victory over the previous Western-backed government in August. In fact, this is undermining their claim to have restored security to Afghanistan after decades of war. Now, beyond headlines, that is, stories that are making the news but not the headlines.
It's Halloween. People in many countries are celebrating the spooky festival with a twist. Netflix hit thriller series Squid Game is a new addition to the celebrations. Thousands of Hong Kong revelers flock to the city's nightlife hub of Lan Kwai Fong, with Squid Game costumes proving popular on the night before Halloween. The hit Netflix series has inspired an array of costumes which includes guards, contestants and a killer robotic doll. Due to the COVID-19 situation being stable, revelers say this year's Halloween celebrations were bigger than last year's. South Koreans too flocked to the Itaewon nightlife neighborhood in Seoul, dressed in costumes of characters from Squid Game on Saturday to celebrate Halloween. Squid Game is a South Korean thriller and people in the country are proud of its global success. Costumes inspired by the popular Netflix series Squid Game stole the show at an annual Halloween parade in New Taipei, Taiwan too. Revelers, among them many children below the age restrictions to watch the show, could be seen in full Squid Game dress. One group even brought a prop coffin with them. Thousands of fans of the Netflix series Squid Game also flocked to Sydney's iconic harbour on Halloween to view a 4.5-meter replica of the famous red light, green light doll from the hugely popular series. Commissioned by Netflix and stationed in front of the Sydney Harbour Bridge and Opera House, the replica was flanked by two masked guards dressed in pink jumpsuits as it chants red light, green light, turning its head to reveal red eyes. Divers took to the waters of the Key Largo in Florida on Sunday to celebrate Halloween underwater. More than a dozen divers submerged themselves with knives and pumpkins to compete. The winner was Dan Edismo from Chicago, who had some help in the competition from a plastic shark. Gilled yellowtail fish took a close interest in the competition, swimming near the divers on the lookout for treats. Thousands of Mexicans crowded into the main avenue of Mexico City for a lively Day of the Dead parade on Sunday, relishing the chance to mark the festive tradition after the coronavirus pandemic cast a thick pall over it last year. Most of the mass spectators lining up wore protective face masks as they watched colorful float bands and performers trundle down the street. Children sat atop their parents' shoulders to catch sight of the procession of floats bearing dancers in indigenous attire and feathered headdresses. A wooden canoe used by the ancient Maya and believed to be 1,000 years old has turned up in southern Mexico. The extremely rare canoe was found almost completely intact, submerged in a freshwater pool known as a cenote, thousands of which dot Mexican's peninsula near the ruins of the Chichen Itza, once a major Maya city, featuring elaborately carved temples and towering pyramids. Measuring a little over 5 feet in length and 80 centimeters wide, the canoe was possibly used to transport water from the cenote or deposit ritual offerings, according to a statement from the Mexican Antiquities Institute (INAH). Dozens of motorcyclists wearing makeup and costumes showed off their best aerobatics on the streets of Venezuelan capital on Sunday during the Halloween festivities. The convoy of motorcycle trick riders toured the city from east to west while performing stunts, wheelies at high speeds while standing on one foot or a knee from the seat of a back footpeg. World Today Desk, DD India.
And now, as we end our bulletin, it's time for our special segment on history, Today in History. So let's take a look at what happened on this day in the past.
On November 2nd in 1930, Haile Selassie was crowned Emperor of Ethiopia. Prior to his coronation, he had been the regent plenipotentiary of Ethiopia from 1916. On the same day in 1950, playwright George Bernard Shaw died. An Irish playwright, critic, polemicist and political activist, Shaw wrote more than 60 plays including major works such as Man and Superman, Pygmalion and Saint Joan. On the very same day in 1998, Hurricane Mitch faded after a week-long rampage through Central America. Death toll in the catastrophe reached an estimated 9,000. On this day in 2016, the Chicago Cubs won the World Series for the first time since 1908, ending the longest Major League Baseball championship. World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, the nation is celebrating Dhanteras today, and it marks the beginning of Diwali. So the whole world will be celebrating the Festival of Lights on Thursday. Dhanteras is celebrated 2 days before Diwali. People across India, they throng markets to shop on the occasion of Dhanteras. It's believed that by purchasing some item made of a precious metal on Dhanteras, that brings you good luck. So we leave you with these visuals as we say goodbye, and we'll be back tomorrow with more updates from the international arena. That's the world today. Thanks for being with us. Namaskar.